James Rupert Lowe, a former World War I veteran born on June 14, 1896. A man who served Australia and the Allied powers for 3 years. He was a brave and loyal man who worked as a signal linesman running the lines during battles. 2 years after the war had started, James had enlisted to join on October 1916 due to financial responsibilities to look after family. This was 7 months after the Anzac forces failed to capture the Turkish beach of Gallipoli. James was 20 years old at the time of enlistment. Once James joined the army, he started basic training in Seymour for 2 months before being sent off overseas where he would continue his training. On the 6th of September 1916, Australian boats arrived in the Port Melbourne Station Pier to take the fresh soldiers to England. The boat James boarded, the HMAT A7 Medic, carried approximately 500 Australian troops. 21 days had gone by, and the troops stopped off at Durban, South Africa, where they would spend 3 days before moving to Cape Town. The Australian troops stopped at 3 destinations in Africa, including Durban and Cape Town in South Africa, and Freetown in Sierra Leone. Their trip inside Freetown was disallowed in the end due to the widespread disease of yellow fever. The team stayed on the ship for 5 days before leaving to the final destination of England. It took the ship 2.5 weeks to travel, but they arrived in Devonport, Plymouth on the 18th of February 1917. During his time in England, James moved through 6 different camps, waiting for his opportunity to be drafted. At camp, James had learned how to connect wires together to keep communication between the generals in the field and the generals back at headquarters. His final training camp in Chicksands was when he learned how to use a gas mask in the likely occurrence of a gas attack from the Germans. Gas attacks became a frequent thing after 1915 due to the German army becoming more desperate as France hadn't fell and the Russians were still fighting on the Eastern Front. After several months of training in England, James was finally called up to serve in Belgium. 2 weeks before heading into Belgium, James had his final training in Abbeville, France, where they would prepare for the Battle of Passchendaele, otherwise known as the Third Battle of Ypres. This battle went on for 3 months, ending in German defeat. The Allies suffered between 200 to 450,000 casualties, whereas the Germans suffered between 215 to 400,000, with 24,000 taken as prisoners. When he first arrived in Belgium, he noted there being a lot of noise and the place being very lively. He had his eyes open to the devastation of the country. As far as you could see, the whole ground was just one mass of shell holes. Between late September and mid-October, James spent his time going to the front lines in Lillegate Ypres. His job was to spend time at the front, sending and receiving messages and fixing faults on the communication lines. Throughout his time in Belgium, James moved to 4 different places due to desperation for more soldiers. He moved to Anzac Ridge, then Lowe, then Kamel. Kamel was a near-death sentence for James, as bomb shelling was occurring around him. Luckily, the wind was strongly blowing in the opposite direction, which may have saved his life. When the Battle of Passchendaele ended, most Anzac troops earned 2 months' rest. He moved to Dronute, Belgium, so that he could rest. Majority of the time, he had to stay active, so lucky for him, he had to exercise and play football. When February arrived, James moved back to Kamel in what he called a concrete pillbox, 8 yards from the Germans. Shelling from the Germans was common, so James had to keep his role in fixing communication lines. Later, James was sent off to France, where he would serve in the Second Battle of the Somme, dating from March the 21st to April the 5th, 1918. This acted as the last desperate attempt for the Germans to capture France as reinforcements of American troops almost arrived. The Somme was known for its weather. Constant rain and mud made living conditions for the soldiers difficult. The troops were living inside homes, evacuated by the French. It wasn't until April the 25th when James served in the Battle of Villebretonneau. This was seen as some as the turning point in the war. The Australian forces pushed the Germans out of the town to allow a counterattack. After the battle, James was awarded the Military Medal of Bravery. The Germans had cut off a communication line from the brigade headquarters. Under heavy fire, James had to fix the line to keep communications going. A few of James's assistants retreated, but James held strong and fixed the line in the end. After Villebraneur, James had to attend signalling school for a fortnight, where he would learn more about communications. He would learn to fix lines during battles in Blangy-Tronville, Cardenet, and La Houssay. The last major battle James would serve in was the Battle of Amiens. This battle started to show the struggle of the German army, as this was the start of large numbers of German troops being taken as prisoners. Prisoner numbers were measured as high as 50,000. James's role had changed in the late stages of the battle by capturing some prisoners. On August the 22nd, he moved back to Morcourt and stayed there, filling in time until August 29th when they moved to Villa Carbonel. James was based in a trench halfway between stations to the forward and rear to maintain communications and fix faults in the line. On October the 11th, James moved to Huppy, France to keep himself busy for the time being. By this time, the combined allies of Britain, France, the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand had made a huge success in pushing the Germans out of France and Belgium. By the time November the 7th came along, James stated that there were rumours spread that Germany was surrendering. By this time, Bulgaria, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire had surrendered. Germany were all alone. 4 days later, it was finally confirmed that Germany had surrendered. It took 6 months for the Allies to decide on war punishments for Germany, but in the end, it was settled with the Treaty of Versailles. Late in 1918, James was awarded with his 3 military medals given to him by the Prince of Wales. After the war was over, James stayed in France studying English, arithmetic, history, and geography until May the 20th, when he was sent to England for an operation on his hernia. By the time it was August, James was ready to go home. He boarded the Yankist for the voyage back in Australia. He arrived in Melbourne on October the 8th, 1919. As the years went on, he never discussed to people about his experience in the war. The sight of death and destruction around him scarred him for life. This war was pointless and a waste of human life. James would continue to live a happy life. He got married after the war, had 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren, of which I am proudly one of. After the war, he resumed his job, working with Australian Customs. Sadly, in the end, he passed away at the age of 86 in 1982. His bravery in the war will not be forgotten, and he will continue to be a role model for future generations to come. Rest in peace, James Rupert Lowe.